At Easter dinner, my father, Dean, slammed his fist on the table so hard the silverware rattled. He leaned across the dishes, his face red with rage, and shouted, "You're a disgrace! Get out of my house!" For a moment, the entire room froze. My younger brother Nolan dropped his fork. My sister Clara stared down at her plate, pretending she hadn't heard anything. No one dared to look at me. I sat there, stunned, with the pain in my leg reminding me of every sacrifice I had made in uniform. For 8 years, I sent home every paycheck from the Navy SEALs, believing I was supporting my family, believing they were proud of me. I came back injured, scarred, and walking with a limp, expecting to be welcomed. Instead, I was treated like garbage in my own childhood home. My father's voice cut through me like a blade. "Don't look at me like that, Elias. You heard me. Leave. Now." His eyes were filled with something colder than anger. They held contempt, as if I was less than nothing to him. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping the floor. My heart was racing, my body trembling, not just from pain but from betrayal. I had fought for my country, nearly lost my life, and here I was being cast out like a criminal by the man I had once idolized. That was the last time I would ever sit at that table as his son. What I didn't know then was that leaving his house that night would lead me to the one person who still truly loved me, and to the secret she had been carrying for years. The moment my grandmother saw me, she told me the truth about my mother's death, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. I grew up believing family was everything. My mother, Laura, used to whisper to me before bed, "No matter how hard life gets, Elias, you will always have us." Those words carried me through boot camp, through long deployments overseas, and through the endless nights when I wondered if I would live to see another sunrise. I fought not just for my country, but for the family waiting at home. At least, that was what I thought. When I enlisted in the Navy SEALs, I was 19, full of fire and determination. My father, Dean, never told me he was proud. He simply said, "Don't fail." That was his way. He was a man who valued strength, reputation, and control above all else. My mother, though, was different. She hugged me so tight at the bus station I could barely breathe. And when she let go, her eyes glistened with tears. "Write me when you can," she begged. I promised I would. During my years of service, I rarely kept anything for myself. I sent home nearly every dollar I earned, trusting my family to put it to good use. I imagined the money paying for my younger brother Nolan's college, for Clara's art classes, for keeping the house in good shape. I thought of it as my way of protecting them, even while I was thousands of miles away. Every time I came home on short leave, though, I noticed small things. Nolan had grown more distant. Clara avoided deep conversations, and my father barely spoke more than a few clipped sentences. I told myself it was just their way of dealing with my absences. Everything changed during my last deployment. A mission went wrong. The explosion that tore through the night also tore through my body, leaving me with scars that ached every time I moved and a limp I would carry for the rest of my life. I was flown home for treatment, and for the first time, I felt the fragility of the body I had once thought indestructible. Even then, I told myself my family would help me heal. By the time Easter rolled around, I had been home for several months. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word never sat right with me. Lucky men walked without pain. Lucky men could sleep through the night without flashes of fire and smoke ripping through their dreams. Still, I put on my best clothes and accepted Clara's invitation to join the family for dinner. I told myself it would be a chance to reconnect, a chance to remind them that despite my injuries, I was still their son, still their brother. When I arrived, the house looked the same as it always had, with the neatly trimmed hedges and the pale blue shutters my mother used to clean every spring. Inside, the air smelled of roasted ham, fresh bread, and cinnamon pie. Clara greeted me first, her smile nervous, her arms wrapping around me gently as if she feared she might break me. Nolan stood behind her, his hands shoved in his pockets, offering a half-hearted nod. My father appeared last, his face unreadable, his eyes scanning me from head to toe as though I were a stranger. We sat around the table, the plates piled high with food, but the air felt heavy. Conversation was shallow. Nolan talked about a new internship, Clara about a small gallery that displayed her sketches. My father said nothing, chewing methodically, his jaw tightening every time his eyes landed on me. I tried to bridge the silence. "I'm proud of you, Nolan," I said. "That internship could open doors." He gave me a quick nod, muttering thanks, but his eyes darted toward our father as if seeking permission to engage. The tension built with every passing minute. I tried again, telling Clara how proud Mom would have been to see her art displayed. Her fork clattered against her plate, and she forced a smile, whispering, "Thanks, Eli." My father slammed his glass down, making everyone jump. "Enough," he growled. His voice carried a sharpness that made the hairs on my arms rise. "You sit here talking like you've done something grand, but all I see is a broken man living off pity." The words cut deeper than any wound I had suffered in combat. I looked around the table, searching for someone to defend me, but Nolan kept his eyes down, and Clara busied herself with folding her napkin. No one spoke. The silence was louder than any explosion I had ever heard. I could feel my chest tighten, my breath shallow. I forced myself to speak, my voice shaking. "Dad, for 8 years I sent home every paycheck. I thought I was helping this family. I thought I was making you proud." His eyes burned into mine, cold and unyielding. "Proud? You think limping home, a drain on everyone around you, is something to be proud of? You've brought nothing but shame. You are a disgrace, Elias. Get out of my house." My chair scraped against the floor as I stood. My legs trembled, but not just from the injury. It was the weight of betrayal, the crushing realization that no matter what I had given, no matter what I had lost, I would never be enough for him. I looked one last time at my siblings, silently begging them to speak, but they stayed frozen. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, every step echoing the truth that the family I thought I had fought for no longer wanted me. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the sting of tears I could no longer hold back. That night, my father broke something in me that would never fully heal. But what I didn't know then was that being cast out would lead me to the only person who still saw me for who I truly was. My grandmother was waiting, and the moment she saw me, she would reveal the truth about my mother's death. That truth would change everything I thought I knew about my family and about myself. The front door slammed behind me, and the sound echoed through my chest like a gunshot. The cool night air hit my face, but it did nothing to numb the heat burning inside me. My body ached from the injury, my legs screaming with each step, but the pain in my heart was sharper. I had faced enemies in foreign lands, men with weapons and hatred in their eyes, but nothing had prepared me for the moment my own father told me I was no longer his son. I stood at the edge of the driveway, staring at the house that no longer felt like home. Through the dining room window I could see my family still seated at the table, the glow of the chandelier casting them in warm light. They looked whole, untouched, as if nothing had happened. For a moment, I wanted to run back inside to shout, to demand that someone, anyone, speak up for me. But the truth was clear. If they had not defended me when I was standing there, they never would. The street was quiet except for the distant hum of cars on the highway. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and started walking, my limp slowing me down. Each step sent a sharp reminder through my hip and thigh, but I refused to stop. I had no car, no friends in town I could turn to, no one left to call. My father's words rang in my head like a drumbeat. "You're a disgrace." Get out. I made my way to the bus station, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The place smelled faintly of gasoline and old coffee. A few other travelers sat slumped in plastic chairs, clutching their bags, their faces blank with exhaustion. I lowered myself onto a bench, wincing as I adjusted my leg. The woman at the counter barely looked up when I asked about tickets. "Where you headed?" she asked. My voice cracked as I answered, "To Maple Hollow." "To Ruth Anders' farm," she tapped her keyboard and handed me a paper ticket. "Bus leaves in 10 minutes, lane 3. As I sat waiting, the memories came flooding back. Grandma Ruth had always been the one person who treated me like more than a soldier. As a boy, I spent summers on her farm, chasing chickens, hauling hay, listening to her stories on the porch swing as fireflies lit up the night. When Mom died, Ruth held me in her arms and whispered that my mother's love would never leave me. I had not seen her in years, but in that moment, I needed her more than ever. The bus rumbled up, brakes screeching as it pulled into the lane. I climbed aboard, the steps testing the limits of my strength. The driver gave me a nod as I handed him the ticket. Inside, the air was stale with the scent of old upholstery and diesel fuel. I slid into a seat near the middle, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The city lights blurred as the bus pulled away, and soon we were swallowed by the dark stretches of highway, with nothing but the hum of the engine and the occasional cough from another passenger. My thoughts grew louder. I replayed every moment from dinner, searching for signs I had missed. Had Clara's nervous smile been a plea for me to stay quiet? Had Nolan's silence been shame, or was it agreement with Dad? And what about the money I had sent home all those years? What had it been used for? Did my father spend it on bills, or did he tuck it away to line his own pockets? The questions gnawed at me, but there were no answers on that bus. I shifted in my seat, my leg throbbing, my chest heavy. For years, I had defined myself by service, by sacrifice, by giving everything I had for others. Now I wondered if I had given to the wrong people. Maybe my father had never cared. Maybe my mother had been the only one who truly saw me. The thought of her sent a pang through my heart, sharper than any physical wound. I remembered her laugh, the way she sang while cooking, the gentle way she placed her hand on my cheek when I was hurting. Losing her had been the hardest moment of my life, but tonight felt almost as painful, because it felt like losing the rest of my family too. The bus rattled along the winding roads leading out of town. Streetlights grew fewer, and the world outside became endless fields and forests, shadows stretching beneath the moon. I closed my eyes, but sleep would not come. Every time I drifted, I saw my father's face, twisted with disgust, his voice thundering in my ears. Shame, anger, grief, they tangled together until I could no longer tell one from the other. Hours later, the driver called out, "Maple Hollow." Last stop here, I gathered my small duffel bag and made my way off the bus. The air was cooler out here, fresher, carrying the scent of earth and pine. The old town clock tower stood in the distance, its hands frozen at nearly midnight. I was the only passenger to get off, and as the bus roared away, silence settled over me like a blanket. I began the walk toward Grandma Ruth's farm. The gravel road crunched beneath my boots, each step taking me closer to the only place that had ever felt like sanctuary. I could see the faint outline of her farmhouse in the distance, the porch light glowing like a beacon. My body ached with exhaustion, but my heart pushed me forward. As I approached, I saw movement on the porch. Grandma Ruth stood there, her small frame wrapped in a shawl, her silver hair catching the light. She must have heard the bus, must have known I would come. Her hands gripped the railing, and even from a distance I could see the way her eyes widened as she recognized me. In that moment, I felt both relief and fear. Relief that someone still cared enough to wait for me. Fear because I could see something in her expression. An urgency, a weight, that told me she had been carrying a truth far heavier than I could imagine. That night had already broken me, but what awaited on that porch would shatter me in ways I never expected. The gravel crunched under my boots as I climbed the last stretch of road toward Grandma Ruth's porch. My body was heavy, my leg throbbing with each step, but the sight of her standing there kept me moving. Her porch light glowed warm against the dark countryside, and her figure was steady, small but unshaken. She had been waiting. "Elias?" she called softly, her voice carrying across the night air. I froze for a moment. The sound of my name spoken with that kind of love was almost too much to bear after what had just happened. My throat tightened, and I swallowed hard, forcing myself forward. When I reached the steps, she came down to meet me. She wrapped her arms around me with a strength I didn't expect from someone her age. Her shawl smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent I remembered from childhood. I pressed my face into her shoulder, and for the first time that night I allowed myself to cry. "What have they done to you, my boy?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I tried to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. Finally, I forced them out. "Dad told me I was a disgrace." "He threw me out, Grandma, in front of everyone, her arms tightened around me as if she could hold my broken pieces together." When she finally pulled back, her eyes glistened with tears, but behind them was something else, an intensity, a knowing. She cupped my face in her weathered hands. "Come inside, Elias. There's something I should have told you long ago." Inside, the farmhouse felt the same as it had when I was a boy. The wooden floors creaked, the scent of wood smoke lingered, and the walls were lined with family photos. I glanced at the picture of my mother in the hallway, her smile bright, her eyes alive. The sight of it nearly dropped me to my knees. Grandma guided me to the kitchen, the heart of her home. She poured me a cup of tea, her hands trembling slightly as she set it before me. I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug but didn't drink. I only watched her, waiting. "Tell me everything," she said gently. "What happened tonight?" I recounted the dinner, every cruel word my father had thrown at me, every moment of silence from my siblings. With each sentence, her jaw tightened, her knuckles whitening around the edge of the table. When I finished, she closed her eyes and let out a long, weary sigh. "I should have told you the truth years ago," she murmured. "But I thought I was protecting you." Her words sent a chill through me. "Protecting me from what?" She looked at me then, her gaze steady, her voice low but firm. "From your father. From what really happened to your mother." My stomach twisted. For years, I had believed my mother died from an illness, something sudden that none of us could stop. It was the story my father told. I never questioned it. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice rough. Grandma's hands trembled as she reached across the table, placing her palm over mine. "Your mother didn't just fall sick, Elias. She was worn down. She was crushed by years of living under your father's pride and cruelty." Her words hit me harder than a blow. I sat frozen, my mind racing back to the small moments I remembered. Mom's tired eyes, the way she forced a smile when Dad barked orders, the quiet nights when I heard her crying through the walls. "She used to come to me," Grandma continued, her voice breaking. "She would sit on this very porch and tell me she felt invisible, like her spirit was being smothered." Dean never lifted a hand against her, but words can wound deeper than fists. He refused to let her seek proper treatment when her health began to fail. He told her it would make him look weak if people thought his wife was fragile. Anger surged through me, hot and uncontrollable. He let her suffer? For his pride? Grandma nodded slowly. Yes. She begged him to take her to specialists, to get help, but he refused. By the time I could intervene, it was too late. She faded away, not only from sickness, but from heartbreak. Your father may never admit it, but his pride killed her as surely as any disease. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, my chest heaving. The betrayal I had felt at dinner was nothing compared to this. My entire life I had blamed myself in some way for not being home more, for not saving her. Now I knew the truth. It wasn't me. It was him. Grandma's eyes softened. Your mother loved you more than anything, Elias. Before she passed, she told me, promise me you'll tell him one day. Promise me he'll know it wasn't his fault. Tears blurred my vision. I could hardly breathe under the weight of her words. "All these years," I whispered. "All these years I thought I wasn't enough." "You were always enough," Grandma said firmly. "It was your father who was never enough for her, and he knows it. That is why he lashes out at you, because deep down he cannot face what he did." The room spun as I tried to take it all in. The anger, the grief, the relief. It all crashed over me at once. I buried my face in my hands, shaking with sobs I had held in for years. Grandma moved her chair closer and wrapped her arm around me. Her strength steadied me in a way nothing else could. "You are not your father, Elias. Do you hear me? You carry your mother's heart, and that is something he could never take away." In that moment, I felt the weight of truth settle inside me. It was devastating, but it was also freeing. For the first time since my mother's death, I understood. The shame I had carried all these years was never mine to bear. I wiped my face and looked at Grandma, her eyes fierce even through her tears. "Thank you for telling me," I whispered. She nodded. "It is time you know everything. You deserve to live free of his shadow." The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall, each second echoing in the silence that followed Grandma's words. My mind was spinning. The truth about my mother's death had cracked something open inside me, and I could feel years of pain rushing out like a broken dam. Still, there was something in Grandma's eyes, something unsaid, and it made my chest tighten. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice hoarse, "you're still holding something back. Aren't you?" Her hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. She glanced toward the photograph of my mother hanging by the doorway, her eyes wet with memories. "Yes," she admitted, "there is more you need to know. It is the part I have dreaded telling you most." I leaned forward, my palms pressed flat against the table. "Tell me. I can take it." She looked at me with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Your father was not only cruel to your mother in his pride, he was unfaithful to her, more than once. She knew it. She carried that knowledge quietly, believing if she stayed strong for you and your siblings, she could bear it. But when her health began to fail, when she needed his compassion most, he turned colder. He left her alone in her suffering." The words struck me like a physical blow. My stomach churned, my jaw locked, and I felt rage rising in me stronger than anything I had ever felt on the battlefield. "He cheated on her? While she was sick?" Grandma's voice broke as she nodded. "Yes, she confided in me. She begged me not to tell you or your siblings at the time. She said she wanted you to remember your father as a strong man, not the broken one she saw, but her heart couldn't bear the weight. That betrayal was the final wound. It crushed what little strength she had left." I slammed my fist onto the table, the teacup rattling against its saucer. My whole body shook. All this time, he let me believe she just faded away. He let me think she was taken by something no one could stop, and it was him, his choices, his pride, his lies. Tears blurred my vision, but anger burned hotter than the grief. I had faced enemies overseas who tried to break me, but nothing cut deeper than knowing the man I once wanted to make proud was the same man who had destroyed my mother. Grandma reached out, her hand steady on mine despite her trembling frame. "Elias, listen to me. You cannot let his sins define you. Your mother did not want you to carry this burden. She wanted you to know the truth so you would not spend your life chasing the approval of a man who never deserved it." Her words pierced through the storm raging in my chest. I lowered my head into my hands, sobbing, the sound raw and broken. For years, I had been driven by the need to prove myself to my father, to show him I was strong, worthy, honorable. I sent home my paychecks believing it would earn me a place at his table. I carried scars, thinking he would see them as proof of my sacrifice. And all along, he was the one who tore down the woman who loved me most. The truth shifted something in me. The shame I had carried was no longer mine. The burden of failure belonged to him, not to me. Through my tears, I heard Grandma's voice again, soft but steady. Your father will never admit the truth. He will cling to his pride until his last breath. But you, Elias, you can choose differently. You can honor your mother not by fighting for his approval, but by living a life that reflects her love. I looked up at her, my face wet, my body shaking. How do I do that, Grandma? How do I move forward knowing all this? She squeezed my hand. You start by letting go of the man who cast you out. You hold close the memory of the woman who loved you more than life, and you carry her strength with you. That is how you heal. Her words sank deep into me, settling in places I didn't know had been hollow for years. I felt as if I were standing at the edge of two paths, one that led to bitterness and rage, and another that led to freedom, painful but real. I wiped my eyes and nodded slowly. I want to honor her. I don't want his voice in my head anymore. Grandma's lips curved into the faintest smile, weary but proud. That is what she would want. And I believe you will find your way, Elias. You already have her heart. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. It was fragile, a flicker of light in the darkness, but it was there. The truth had shattered me, but it had also set me free. I no longer needed to fight for my father's approval. I no longer needed to prove my worth to a man who had none. I looked again at the photograph of my mother, her smile warm and alive. For the first time, I allowed myself to smile back. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally understood. Her love had never left me. And now I could live in a way that kept it alive. That night at Grandma's kitchen table, I lost the father I thought I had, but I found the truth about my mother. It was the truth that would shape every choice I made from then on. I stayed at Grandma Ruth's farmhouse that night, unable to sleep, the truth echoing in my mind. Every creak of the old wooden floors, every rustle of the wind outside the window, reminded me I was no longer the same man who had walked into her kitchen. The world I thought I knew had crumbled, but in its place, something new was beginning to take shape. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, spilling across the worn quilt on the bed she had made for me. For the first time in years, I woke without the weight of guilt pressing down on my chest. The pain in my leg was still there, the scars still etched across my body, but my spirit felt different. The shame that had haunted me since my mother's death no longer belonged to me. It belonged to my father. I found Grandma Ruth already awake, standing at the stove with her apron tied neatly, flipping pancakes the way she always had when I was a boy. She looked over her shoulder and smiled softly. "Morning, Elias. Sit down." "Eat something," I obeyed, sinking into the familiar wooden chair. The smell of fresh coffee and butter filled the room, wrapping me in a comfort I hadn't felt in years. She set a plate before me, then sat down across from me, her eyes searching mine. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel different," I admitted. "I feel like I've been carrying someone else's sins on my back all this time. Now I know they were never mine." She nodded, her expression both proud and sad. "That is the hardest lesson, my boy. Sometimes the people we love hurt us so deeply that we mistake their failures for our own. But you know better now. That is how you begin again." I thought about my father's face the night before. Twisted in anger, his words meant to break me. I thought about my siblings, silent and unmoving, too afraid or unwilling to stand for me. The hurt was still there, sharp and raw, but it no longer defined me. I realized in that moment I had a choice. I could live chasing the approval of people who would never give it, or I could live honoring the love of the one person who had always been in my corner, my mother. After breakfast, I walked outside with Grandma. The air was crisp, the fields stretching wide under the morning sky. She rested her hand on my arm as we stood together. "Elias, you may not see it yet, But your life is not broken. You are not ruined. You are being remade. Your scars tell a story, but they do not tell the whole story. That is yours to write." Her words sank deep, and I realized she was right. My service, my sacrifices, even my injury, they were not the end. They were part of my story, but not the part that defined my worth. What defined me was the strength to stand, to keep moving, and to choose love over bitterness. Later that day, I walked down to the old barn I used to play in as a child. The dust hung in the air, sunlight cutting through cracks in the wood. I sat on a bale of hay, staring at my hands, calloused and scarred. For so long, I had believed those hands had failed my family. Now, I understood they had carried more than most men ever would. They had fought, they had given, they had held on when everything around me seemed lost. My mother would have been proud, not ashamed. That thought broke me open again, but this time, the tears were not of shame. They were of release. I could feel her presence with me, not in a haunting way, but in a way that reminded me love never dies. My grandmother's truth had freed me to see that my mother's love was still guiding me, urging me to live, not for my father's approval, but for my own peace. That night, as I lay in bed at the farmhouse, I made a silent vow. I would no longer chase after my father's acceptance. I would no longer define myself by the coldness of people too weak to show love. Instead, I would build a life my mother would have been proud of. A life rooted in compassion, in honesty, in strength that was not about control but about love. In the weeks that followed, I helped Grandma around the farm. The work was hard, and my legs slowed me down, but she never made me feel like a burden. She treated me like family, like a grandson she cherished, not a soldier broken by war. Each day, I grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. I thought often about returning to face my father, to confront him with the truth, but I realized he did not deserve that confrontation. His denial, his cruelty, his silence, that was his prison. I did not need to step inside it again. Instead, I began to picture the future. I thought about finding work I could do despite my injury, about building something of my own, about one day raising a family that would never know the kind of coldness I had endured. I thought about teaching my children what my mother had taught me, that no matter how hard life gets, love makes you whole. Looking back now, I see that Easter dinner as the moment my old life ended. It was brutal, humiliating, and painful, but it was also the night that pushed me toward the truth I needed to hear. My father's rejection felt like the end of everything, but it was actually the beginning of something greater. The lesson I carry with me is simple but powerful. Family is not about blood, it is about love, about those who stand with you when you are at your lowest, about those who remind you of your worth when the world tells you otherwise. My father cast me out, but my grandmother opened the door to truth, and my mother's memory gave me the strength to keep going. As I sit here today, I no longer see myself as a disgrace. I see myself as a man who survived, who endured, and who chose to rise above the cruelty of another, and I will spend the rest of my life honoring the love that saved me. Sometimes the ones who should love us most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But sometimes, if we are lucky, we find the strength to turn that pain into something greater. That is what my mother would have wanted for me. That is the life I choose to live. That night at my grandmother's farmhouse, I finally understood the truth. My father's pride and cruelty had destroyed my mother, but it was her love that still carried me forward. I had spent years chasing approval from a man who would never give it, when all along I already had the love that mattered most. If you took something from my story, if it moved you or reminded you of your own strength, I'd love for you to let me know. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below telling me what part of this story hit you the hardest. Your thoughts mean more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories about truth, family, and finding strength in the hardest places, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This community is about more than just stories. It's about reminding each other we're not alone. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.